anybody following, the progressive movement in the United States knows Jimmy Dore. Now, Jimmy Dore interviews a lot of people, but he's never gets interviewed himself. So we here on the Robust Opposition are interviewing Jimmy Dore because we want to find out how this comedian became one of the most important political journalists of our time. Seriously, right?
It's a little bit of a stretch, but I appreciate you saying that. You know what? My friend was just asking me this the other night at dinner, and he said, how did this happen? How did your show get to be so popular? And I just because they make it so easy, right? Because all you have to do is tell the truth about Syria, and all of a sudden you're a great journalist because nobody else is, right? All you have to do... And so all you have to do is tell the truth about liberals, and you know what I mean? And because no one else is. And when I say liberals, I mean really neoliberals, and no one is really critiquing the system, and the people who are forced to the margins of society, and people are hungry for it, right? So Bernie Sanders' campaign, showed everybody how corrupt the media was, right? And I think a lot of people woke up to, because they knew who Bernie was and they saw how they were talking about him. They're like, that's just bullshit. And so it was it's just easy. So that's how this happened. And it's still today, I just tweeted out, I retweeted Matt Inglese's stupid tweet that he made today about Marion Barry and Trump. And, I just said that if you wonder why people get their news from YouTube, it's because people who are supposed to be serious journalists consistently know less than jagoff nightclub comedians on a daily basis. And that's why.
But I want to know, Jimmy, you started out as just a normal comedian at some point, and then you got political. What was it that made you political?
Well, what made me was the Iraq War. I couldn't not talk about it. And so I would go on stage and I couldn't not talk about it. And I'll never forget, it was maybe a couple months after the Iraq invasion, I was telling jokes in Houston, and I was doing some George Bush jokes because, I'm a genius. And I got the weirdest heckle I ever got in my career that night. This guy yelled at me, he goes, "He's protecting your freedom of speech, now shut the fuck up." I was caught in a riddle. So that's what made me, and then, so that's why I just couldn't stop doing that. And I started doing a multimedia show with video, and some people from KPFK, Ali Lexa saw me doing it at the Improv, and then he had me come in, and and then Alan Minsky offered me a show, and that was that. And so that's how I started doing my political show on KPFK. And that led to a relationship with the Young Turks, and that's led to my own show, The Jimmy Dore Show.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the Young Turks, because Caitlin Johnstone, who you've had on your show, just posted an article in a new publication that I've never heard of called, I'm confusing this with Ellen Brown. She posted a great article on China and how they're doing this infrastructure development in a publication I never heard of called Danielle, and how we could do it if we had a state bank. But Caitlin posted her article in Steam It, and she was talking about how Cenk is now on the Russia bandwagon, even at the same time that he's talking about we need to be skeptical. What's your opinion about this? And also, I heard that you were taken off of the main show of the Young Turks.
No, I wasn't taken off. That was that got started as an internet rumor. That's not true. I wasn't. But what's my take on the Russiagate is that, my take on the Russiagate is this is white privilege in action, right? These are people who don't want you to examine the system, and they want you to be talking about everything else except overturning this bullshit system. As I like to tell people, what do you call a system that takes the richest country in the world and renders half of its citizens poor or low income? You call that a failed system, right? And no one's saying that. No one's talking about a failed system. No one's doing so. That's how I feel about. That's what this Russiagate is. And this is how propaganda works. I mean, this is WMDs all over again, except the only thing is that it's led people on the left to attack Donald Trump from the right, which is a big mistake, right? So now he's got to prove he's not a red, right? And how do you prove you're not a red? You got to send some NATO troops to the Baltics. right? You got to put some ground troops in Syria. You got to do some real bombing, not some fake bomb. I can't believe if you are doing that to Trump, that's not progressive, and you're not a progressive, right? You're a warmonger.
Actually, I was wondering about Cenk because, I saw Cenk at the E-Board meeting, and I asked him some tough questions about how he's taking money from Jeffrey Katzenberg. He got a $20 million investment to hire some journalists, and so far I haven't seen a lot of them, doing the original investigative reporting that they're supposed to be doing. I see a lot of punditry, and unfortunately on the main show, it tends to be kind of mainstream. And I made the point that if he's taking money from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's a big donor to the Democratic Party, how is that not affecting the kind of candidates that, well, he was with Justice Democrats at the time, but, I gave him the analogy, Jeff Bezos, okay, he runs the Washington Post, which is the organ for the deep state, and he also runs Amazon, which took a $600 million contract for the CIA. So I was
and Jeff Bezos sits on a Pentagon board.
Oh, he does?
Yes, he's also on a board. Yes, that's true.
So I was just questioning Cenk, about how he, does he think that this money that he's taken from the establishment Democratic Party would influence him? And of course he says it hasn't, but now we see, this reporting about Russia. So I know that you may not you have to choose your words very carefully, but...
No, I don't... I don't think that's. I don't think Cenk is preaching a false narrative for investment money. I think he truly believes it. I take it. Cenk is what I call a natural Republican, right? So he was a Republican at first for a long time, and he talks about this openly about how he even led pro-Iraq war rallies, right? The first one. And so that's why people are drawn to him, because it's this great journey where he went from this meathead into this progressive, right? And so that's what appealed to me about his journey and about Cenk, is that he started off there and he ended up here. So it often comes up, right, that his what I will call his reflexes might often be a little bit establishment, but that's why I'm there to help, right? So, like, for instance, one of my biggest pieces of personal pride of being on the Young Turks was Cenk and I discussed the death penalty one time on the air, and he was pro death penalty, and I talked to him, and by the end of the segment, he changed. And he said that, I gave him all the arguments, and at the end, he said, you made me a little more progressive today. So I think, if he is what we consider to be wrong on an issue, it's just because he's genuinely believes it. That money, that investment money, that's not how Cenk works. And if he's making a mistake, it's just he's making a mistake. Or I disagree with him. I disagree with him before they took that money. Well, the first gas attack in 2013, and Barack Obama wanted to bomb Syria over that, and they believed it.
And it was proven false.
It was since proven false, right? So my whole thing is I try to tell them, you have to start, my jumping off point is the government is lying. That's where you start, and now you just figure out what they're lying about. Right? And so I never, especially foreign policy, especially that, it was obviously a false flag. And so the second time the gas attack happened, when they tried to say it was Assad doing it, Cenk actually sniffed it out. And he said, this doesn't make any sense. Right. And he said, why would he be doing this if he's winning the war? So I just think so. As far as the money influencing his news coverage, I don't think that's happening. If you dislike his news coverage, which I disagree with the Russiagate narrative and I'm trying to influence them. Kyle Kalinske also is trying to influence them. And what I'm trying to impress upon them is that you're going to be hoisted on your own petard, right? If you push Russiagate, it's just, they always use this to silence the left. Always use this to silence the left. They're already doing it they're doing it to Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, saying he was given secrets. He's a traitor with the communists. And of course, in the UK, they're a little sharper than we are over here. So when they do that shit to him, it just makes Jeremy Corbyn stronger, right? And we're not there yet. And I think it's because when they do it to Bernie, he fucking goes along with it, right? With the Russiagate. And so, and they still smear him.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I did a live stream that I was driving down to the California Democratic Party convention, which you were doing, and I was so pissed off. Sometimes when I get pissed off, I do these streaming while driving videos. But I always tell people I've got the phone propped up here. I'm keeping my eyes on the road. And of course, on the 405, it was 9-mile-an-hour traffic, and my live stream, the title of it was Bernie Sanders STFU, shut the fuck up, because he had just tweeted literally from his Bernie Sanders account, which they tell me the staff does. He doesn't tweet from that account. 6 things about Russia and how they tried to influence his voters and Hillary and da-da-da-da. And it just bothers me. He had just been on Meet the Press, too, repeating, excuse me, the Russiagate narrative. And it bothers me because Bernie knows better. I mean, if you see speeches that he did in the 80s when he was talking about foreign policy and the CIA intervention, even if you watch his a little-known speech, it was not very well promoted, but it was an amazing foreign policy speech that he gave during the campaign at Georgetown University. He talked about Mossadegh, and he talked about all the CIA intervention. Really? Yes, he did. You should check it out, Jimmy. And so Bernie understands this, and yet...
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, people have said, I've heard, by Bernie Sanders defenders, Bernie's very smart. He's playing the long game. He's saying what he needs to say to stay in the Democratic Party. Then I've heard people say the same things they said during the campaign. He was threatened. Did you see the bruise on the side of his face? All this kind of crazy stuff. I really don't know what to make of it, but it bothers me because I see that he's losing a lot of his base. I will say his activist base. Maybe the people who voted for him, he's not lost, but I know a lot of activists who are very upset with this.
Yeah, it's not. He just came out and made a speech the other day about Syria. Yemen, which was fantastic, right? So he partnered up with Mike Lee to go back to the War Powers Act and make sure that Congress is declaring war and not the president on the AUMF. So that was great, right? So, what's that saying? Great men have great flaws, right? So he's certainly better than everybody else who's viable as far on his foreign policy. It's not where I'd like it to be, but he certainly is malleable on that. He certainly listens to people, and this Yemen speech is a proof of that. And so I just I can't believe it when I see them push the Russiagate thing. And then immediately I saw a CIA guy, Evan McMullen, is that his name? He immediately smeared Bernie. And then Ari Melber did the same goddamn thing. That was kind of mind-blowing to see Ari Melber do a McCarthy smear. That's really kind of and I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I knew this was going to happen when Bernie did this. I just didn't know it was going to happen this fast. And it's just amazing that if a dumb guy like me, a nightclub comedian, can see this shit coming, I know they saw it coming and they did it anyway. How did the people around Bernie not know this is going to be used against them? Right. They must know that, right?
I mean, did you see Howard Dean's tweet the other day about Bernie and
I am blocked by Howard Dean, so no.
He basically tweeted that Bernie Sanders accepted foreign contributions. It was an article from the Vermont Digger, and I think the Vermont Digger is a little bit against Bernie too.
Oh, well, was it how many millions of dollars did he take from the Saudis? I'm sorry, he doesn't have the Clinton Foundation working for him, but
big pharma. And
I mean, it's that's just again, that's what they're going to do. That's how they're going to smear everybody. And this whole bullshit, just back in December, Forbes did an article about Cambridge Analytica, brags about influencing our elections. They say we have a perfect track record in 40 elections in the United States. They use social media and they know. So there's a British company, by the way, partly owned by Mercer, and. So there's a British company doing what they would consider, if Russia did it, an act of war, right? So that's still how you know that's bullshit. Just how you know the whole genesis of this is bullshit is that the DNC and Podesta never gave their servers to the FBI to inspect. That's how you know this is bullshit.
And that's what Ray McGovern says, you know?
That's exactly what Ray McGovern says. And then also William Binney, who from VIPS, who I had on my show, he broke it down technically and stuff that I don't understand, but he said that it could not, if it was a hack, they would have the packets at the other end to put it together, and they would show you the evidence. But they don't have they're not showing you the evidence, which means which means it doesn't exist. So these are whistleblowers who actually went against the FBI. And William Binney also told me that, they have the dirt on everybody now. How did who was the head of the FBI for 40 years? I can't think of his name. How did he because he had dirt on everybody. And William Binney's like, that's what's going on right now. They use, with parallel construction, which is where they use these spying powers where they're supposed to be going after terrorists, and they get people for regular, ordinary crimes. They tell the local police about it. Then they say, do a parallel construction on the evidence, meaning you can't tell them that you got the evidence from this because it's unconstitutional. So you have to now create your own evidence trail. So they have dirt on everybody, and that's what he's saying. And he's saying that now the FISA court, by the way, Mueller had lied to the FISA court many times in 2002. And he's also pushed WMDs. And now the left props these people up as they're some kind of heroes. These guys are always who they always are. Yeah. War maniacs, right? And they're anti-progressives. The FBI is not on your side if you're a progressive, okay?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We interfered in elections 182 times. Our CIA interfered in elections 182 times. Right. We've toppled... we've done regime change in 4 different elections, most recently being in the Ukraine, where we took out a guy who was democratically elected because he was favorable to Russia and put in a neo-Nazi, and now that situation...
Now we're arming them.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I mean, it's crazy to think that... So then people will say to me, so you're telling me that Russia didn't try to interfere? I'm saying that everybody tries to interfere all the time, and you're pretending like this is new or important.
Yeah. And not only that, we ran Yeltsin's campaign. We literally sent advisors in to run Yeltsin's campaign, and guess who he put in as his number 2 guy? Putin. So
and why did we do that? People don't. So the next part that people never talk about is, why did we want Yeltsin? Well, it's because they wanted to take their natural resources to give it back to the people. They wanted to institute socialism. They didn't want to do this bullshit crony capitalism. And that in the crony capitalists in the United States were like, we got to go over there and fix this quick. And they did. And that's what happened. And that's why Russia's like it is today. And so, again, it's whatever the CIA, whenever they see power to the people, they say, we got to stop that. And that's what they do. Yeah.
And the latest article in Consortium News by Ray McGovern talks about how Gorbachev wanted to have the anti-ballistic missile treaty, and Reagan got out of it because he had this stupid Star Wars, and Putin was trying to get back into it with Obama. And then, of course, that whole thing happened with the Crimea, which, by the way, the Crimea is in the Russian sphere of influence. My whole thing is that, well, I'm not going to do my live stream again, but if people want to watch my live stream, it is on my YouTube channel, Lauren from LA, and it's Bernie Sanders STFU. So, getting back to Jimmy Dore, who is a genius, and we're so happy to have him, let's talk about what is YouTube doing and Facebook, because I mentioned at the start of this that I have been put in Facebook jail literally 3 times this month for a week each time, simply for sharing. The last thing I did was I shared this fundraiser in all of 6 groups before I got right back into Facebook jail. What's been YouTube doing to you?
So YouTube has introduced new algorithms, right? So it used to be the way YouTube was, if you were a show that people wanted to watch, it rewarded you, right? And so it would push more people towards your videos. And if people were engaged in your videos and watched them and you had a long view time, they would help promote you, and they would push those videos to people who they felt were in your demographic. They don't do that really anymore. And so it used to be, and I talk about this on my show, about how you would see an MSNBC video with 4,000 views or a CNN video with 500 views, which happened all the time. Nobody would go to YouTube to watch a goddamn CNN video, right? Why would you do that? So wouldn't you just go to CNNfriggin.com and watch their bullshit? Why would you go? It doesn't make sense. So what they want, they realize they can't control social media. Social media is the equalizer of information, right? So that's where people were getting their information on Bernie Sanders. They were getting it from the internet, from the Young Turks, from my show, places like that during the primary. And they can't control it till now, but now they can control it, right? So now this is, this is the corporate fascism, right? This is we're leaving free speech up to a couple of Silicon Valley billionaires, which we're not really, by the way. It's the CIA tells them, just like they're doing. It's documented that they're doing it with the Palestinians, right? Facebook will shut down pages. All you have to do is have the government ask, boom, it's done. And so they're trying, so now that's how they can. So and Medium. So here's a slippery slope, right? So Medium just kicked off 3 right-wingers off their platform. Medium is that, which was started by a founder of Twitter. Did you know that? The guy who started Medium? Yes. One of the founders of Twitter started Medium. So they just kicked off 3 right-wingers, Chernovich, Looper, and I forget the other guy. And everybody was cheering this. Of course, journalists from Mother Jones was cheering this, right? And then they said this is a good start. That was a senior writer from Mother Jones said, this is a good start. Now we need to get those crazy anti-Syrian war voices, right? That's a senior writer from Mother Jones.
Who was that, David Korn or one of the other ones?
Not David Korn. I'm going to blank on the guy. Bauer, B-A-U. That's probably not it. So it was the first time I didn't know who this guy was, and then I saw that tweet, and then I looked up who he was. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So
Mother Jones would be turning in her grave, by the way, if she saw what happened to that.
No doubt. Clara Jeffrey. And so it's unbelievable. So, yes. So what was I saying?
You were saying about Medium kicking out
so now they got rid of those, and people are cheering it. But if now they're coming for progressives, and they say, and now their new policy on Medium is if you spread disinformation, well, that means you won't post the Washington Post anymore on Medium because they're always full of disinformation. Weapons of mass destruction, that was disinformation, and that was repeated at every news establishment news organization in the country. So that is complete disinformation. So and when they said 17 intelligence agencies agreed, that was disinformation. That's all made. So this is just to silence the left and the anti-establishment voices, telling the truth about the military-industrial complex and our empire, and telling the truth about neoliberalism here at home. And I can't believe what I'm seeing happen in my lifetime with people like, a union reporter like Chris Hayes has even mentioned West Virginia's teacher strike. And it's just unbelievable what is people consider our lefty media and how hard they have sold out and how hard they suck. It's just that's why people ask me, how did it happen? They make it easy. They suck really bad. And there's even people who consider themselves progressive news people on the internet who parrot that same fucking bullshit. It's like, you're not, why are you on the internet? What are you doing here? You can say that shit anywhere. You go to MSNBC, CNN, ABC, go say that. They're going to silence you. Yeah, okay.
Now, So let me ask you this. So I am always accused of, why are you going against the Democrats? Why are you going against the media? Why aren't you going against Trump? And I always say...
because I saw a meme of Bernie with his shirt off.
The mainstream media is doing such a good job going against Trump, but the problem is they're going against him for the wrong thing. And Richard Eskow wrote a great column last week in which he said that and somebody else did something too about the tax scam, that if the mainstream media would talk about what Trump is doing to the American people, yes, then that would be worthwhile. Like you're always talking about, and I'm always talking about, how 50% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank to pay for an emergency. That 50% of Americans are one accident, job loss, or illness away from dire poverty. That if the rents rise another 5% in Los Angeles, 2,000 more people are going to be homeless. I mean, these are the types of things. Well, actually, the LA Times did write about that. I don't hate the LA Times as much as I hate some of these other publications. They actually still have some good investigative reporters. But the problem is that the mainstream media is going against Trump, but they're going against him for the wrong thing. And I feel that he should be impeached. They should go after him for the emoluments clause, doing business with foreign countries, and obstruction. Yeah, but not against this thing that cannot be proved, which is collusion, which is actually fomenting a new Cold War, which could turn into a hot war with a nuclear power, who was ready to disarm and is now saber rattling. And I find it ironic that we're talking about their saber rattling when we brought them to this place.
Yeah, that's why I talked about lefties or people who consider themselves on the left attacking Trump from the right, saying you have to do real bombing and, mocking him when he bombed Syria that it wasn't good enough and how it's just crazy. And they don't realize that there's that term, useful idiot, and that is exactly what they are, right? So you are doing the bidding of the people who want to destroy you. You're doing the bidding of the military-industrial complex. You're doing the bidding of the right wing. And I try to tell people on the left who are doing that, attacking Trump from the right, as soon as you go against a war, they're going to come at you as a Putin puppet. As soon as you do what you're supposed to do as a progressive and call for détente, they're going to call you a Putin puppet. Just so you know, and you're making that happen. You're allowing that to happen. Instead of fighting against it, you're letting it happen. So it's mind-blowing to me to see people on. Even James Risen, right, is out of his mind.
Yeah, I saw that debate, by the way. I think that Glenn Greenwald mopped the floor with him on that. All he could keep repeating, James Risen, was, well, where do you stand on this? I'm confused about where you stand. Yes.
I'm confused. Yeah, I guess he's confused about a lot of shit because he just makes up definitions of words that nobody else uses.
Yeah, like the colloquial definition of treason, right?
Yeah, he goes, well, it would be the textbook definition of treason. And then he goes, well, it's not the but it's the colloquial, how we all. Well, then it's not the textbook because Glenn just read you the friggin' textbook, right? And I don't know, maybe. I don't know. It's weird that a nightclub comedian should be admonishing a fucking award-winning journalist for not using his words properly.
I know, and James Risen did some good stuff, too, and even was willing to go to jail. Well, I want to know if there's anybody in the audience here, in our live audience, the robust opposition has a live audience, to ask Jimmy Dore some questions.
So you asked what YouTube's doing. So they unsubscribe people from our channel. Every day. So I noticed that we used to sign up. We used to sign up between 500 and 1,000 people a day. And then it dropped down to like 50. And I was like, what? And it was when they changed their algorithms. So now you'll see a CNN video with 4 million views. That would never have happened. And that's because they put it in autoplay. Right? So now if you put on a video and you're watching it, when it ends, it's going to go to a CNN video or an MSNBC video and that's how they're doing that, right? So now they're artificially propping up these news stations that no one wants to watch on YouTube, and they're making them into and they're trying to push people away from shows like ours by unsubscribing people, which is why I have to beg people to subscribe all the time. And people... Every day I get emails. I thought you guys were crazy. I was unsubscribed. I didn't realize. Some people say I got unsubscribed 4 times before they stopped unsubscribing me. So that's another way how. So they monetize all our videos. So I just did a video about there was a teacher who barricaded him after they decided that they should give guns. Right, that they should give guns to teachers. There was a report of a teacher who barricaded himself in a classroom with a gun and shot it. Right, when the principal tried to come in, so I reported that, and they demonetized it. You're not allowed to talk about anything. You're not allowed to talk about Syria, foreign policy, terrorism, war. You're not allowed to talk about school shootings. You can't talk about. Or they'll leave the video up, but they won't. I can't make money on it, so they're trying to cut the legs off from underneath me, and so that's another way.
Do you think we can have our own? Do you think we could have our own Facebook, our own YouTube? Is it possible that we have enough progressives out there that people would follow us if we went to a nonprofit type of platform?
I'm not smart enough to know about how social media works, but some people have threatened to start a new Twitter or the Twitter we have now doesn't make money, so that's so I don't know if anybody would be into funding a new one. So I don't know how. I think it's for whatever reason, we went from Friendster to MySpace to Facebook, and then that was it. It stopped. I don't know why there isn't another thing. Well, there's Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, there's MeWe, there's Minds. Yeah.
See, you know more. You guys know more about than I do about that stuff.
Question, Amy? Okay, I'm repeating the question because I got the microphone here and that didn't come out. She's asking about Cambridge Analytica, who is the Trump campaign's company they use to micro-target people on social media, and if Jimmy's going to get into that.
It was Lee Camp who brought that to my attention about Cambridge Analytica. We just dropped that video, I don't know, yesterday or something. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't. Your first question was why aren't more people talking about it? Why doesn't this get more attention? Well, why did Phil Donahue get fired from MSNBC? Yeah. Why did Ashley Banfield get fired from MSNBC? Why did Ed Schultz get fired from MSNBC? Because they don't want to hear that shit. Yeah. That's why. Yeah. And so that's exactly because they don't want to hear that. There is a narrative right now, and you can't go against it. And the military-industrial complex loves it, and that is we got to ramp up our military because of Russia. And that's it. You know, Tulsi Gabbard is introducing a bill. I'll be dropping a video later today about it. She's like, well, if you're really worried about people tampering with our elections, here's a bill that gives a paper trail, right? So here's for paper ballots. And now the fact that that bill will not get passed shows you that they are full of shit about worrying about foreign tampering in our elections.
I want to ask one question before we get to Brian and Max, and that is your impressions of the California Democratic Party convention, because I know you went down there to cover it, and since Ankur is actually running to be in, that body, Brian Hitchcock, who's the delegate, wants to know the difference between the California Democratic Party and the Mafia.
The Mafia has better food. You know, I went to the California convention, and I did not expect it. I didn't really have an expectation, but it was not encouraging. It was soul-sucking. I was in a couple of big ballrooms and watched a bunch of speeches, and nobody said shit. And Randy Weingarten, who's the teacher union, she got up there and she gave a 10-minute speech. She talked for 9 minutes and 30 seconds about guns to a bunch of people who already feel exactly the same way about it as she does. She didn't talk about the importance of unions or strengthening or card check or any goddamn thing to do with unions. She's a union leader. And Dave Dayen gave a speech, who's a writer for The Intercept, and he said, all the problems in our country could be whittled down or traced back to 3 words: concentrated corporate power. And the room, which was full of people, a couple thousand people, silent. And then a couple minutes later, he got to, and I just couldn't believe it. I was looking around, nothing. And then he got to a part in the speech where he said, do you want to make sure that your election can't be meddled with by a foreign government? And the place went nuts. And I'm just like, wow, this is really heartbreaking, right? I thought after 2016, after Donna Brazil's revelation of the biggest election fraud in the history of our country was committed against progressives in the Democratic Party, that I thought shit was going to change. And we were going to actually talk about what's wrong and what we need. That is not happening. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard was there. She had to go to a small gathering on Friday night to give a speech about how nothing has changed and about how the system is rigged. And it's rigged for who? It's rigged for the elite and the wealthy and the well-connected. And that's why I wish, I know there's all these parties, there's all these groups or progressive organizations, and I just wish we could find a way to get them all together because we have real power. Most people agree with the country agrees with progressive policies, right? So if we could just come together, that's what I thought, like if Bernie would have ran with with Jill Stein, they were like, well, he wouldn't have won. Oh, that's not, they didn't fucking win anyway, right? So, but we could have made a huge difference, and if they would have got 10% of the vote, now the Democrats, there is no way they can win without them. But now, since everybody fell in line and you had progressive news people saying, vote for a corporatist warmonger, and do the same thing that got us here. Keep doing what got us here. Keep doing the goddamn same thing that got us. So now now the Democrats are even worse than they were before, right? That they moved to she picked Tim Kaine as her vice. I mean, it's just, so these people who said, I'm going to fight, I'm going to vote for her and then I'm going to fight her and hold her feet to the fire. It's like that. You can't even get her to cotton to your ideas before you vote for her. She's not going to come around after you vote for her. So the Democrats, and they know that and so there's been a shame campaign that's been happening, even by people, again, who call themselves progressive news places. They'll shame people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. That's she is the only politician in the history of our country who wasn't expected to campaign to get votes. Right? So you're just supposed to give her your vote, right? No, if you don't have enough votes, you're supposed to go get them. Yeah. And if you don't have them, that's your goddamn fault. Who loses an election and blames the fucking voters? Yeah. I'll tell you who does. A megalomaniac, narcissistic, warmongering corporatist named Hillary Clinton.
I'm going to repeat the question. What can we do aside from chipping away at Citizens United to get corporate money out of politics?
So, I mean, we're all familiar with Wolfpack and the work they're doing. So that's like a longer term solution to that. But I'm not a big idea guy. I like to frame things. That's kind of what I do. But I think we can only do what we're doing right now, which is support people who don't take corporate money, right? And Bernie he laid the template for it. So Bernie Sanders laid down the template. You don't have to get in bed with the Wall Street and all the rest of the corporate money. That you could, if you actually speak to, truth to power and speak to have policies that speak to the needs of the people, they will actually support you because you support them. So I think that's what we have to do. I think we need a third party. That's how I think we do it. I think you have a third party, and if someone like Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Nina Turner, whatever, if they started a third party, that would change the Democratic Party like that.
Well, I was on that. 1 second. I was on that steering committee for People's Party, Draft Bernie, and I dropped out of it as soon as I realized that Bernie was never going to go for it because. Right. One of the things that I did, I got to headquarters, Los Angeles headquarters, an hour early before the primary so I could be in the front row, that when Bernie passed me by, I could whisper in his ear what I did say, which is if they cheat you out of the nomination, take Jill's offer and run with her. And I have a photo of him like nodding and smiling. And I actually knew I wasn't going to have a lot of chance to talk with him, so I spoke with Karina Driscoll, his daughter-in-law, and I came with 2 articles. Which showed that actually Ralph Nader did not cost Al Gore the election. Bernie has always thought, and apparently he hasn't talked to Al Gore since 2000 because he's always blamed him for losing the election or costing Al Gore the election. And Bernie also has a very negative experience about third parties from the 1% and 2% vote he got when he ran. But that was back in the 70s, and his thinking has not really evolved since then. So I'm kind of with you, but I feel like since Bernie, like Nick Branagh's original thinking was that we needed Bernie to do this because only someone like Bernie could bring the people along. Do you think that the People's Party is going to have any kind of chance without somebody like Bernie at the helm?
I think it'll be a longer slog without a charismatic leader at the helm. I mean, that's always good. I mean, so I hope they get one. That's my hope. I don't really understand how, I don't understand Nick's vision fully, right? But he's trying to get more power to the progressives. So whatever I can do to help, I'll help. But I really think that's what if we had a third party, if the Green Party's polled at 7 or 8%, that the Democrats would have to deal with them or for certain lose, right? And the problem is they don't care about losing, but then at least they would be exposed, right? And so maybe the change from within seems like the long, hard slog. I know there's a brand new Congress, our revolution, Justice Democrats. There's all these progressive people trying to take over the party from the inside. And I'm all for it. I vote for, I'll support a progressive no matter what party they're in, no matter where they are. And so I just wish there was a third party and we stop shaming people for voting their conscience. Hillary Clinton literally tweeted out before the election, vote your conscience. And then whenever someone wags their finger at me, I show that to them. And they're like, well, that's not what she meant. Well, no shit, that's not what she meant. She meant to vote for your conscience if it means vote for me, but not if it means vote for someone else. Exactly what a megalomaniac, narcissistic, corporatist fucking warmonger would say.
Now, what about, you talk about all the different groups getting together. That's what Gail McLaughlin is trying to do with her campaign. With her campaign for lieutenant governor running as no party preference here in California, she's going up and down the state trying to start local progressive alliances like the Richmond Progressive Alliance, where they got people together based on the different issues. You want to speak to that?
You know, I interviewed Gail, and she's fantastic. She actually has a track record, of getting things done. So she fought back against Chevron, and she won, right? And they've been winning a long time in that city. They took over their city council and progressives, right? So she's a real inspiration. And, so when people were wagging, she was a green when she did that.
Yeah.
And so, people love to say that bullshit line to Jill Stein. Why don't you start local legal? Why don't you get local? And that's a perfect example of that. They do that, right? All over. You're just not aware of it. And so what do I think about, I think if anybody could do it, she can do it. She's fantastic. And, she has a real, people connect with her immediately when she talks. She's a real person. And she could really get some things done. I wish she was running for governor.
Yeah, I thought the same thing also. So, Jimmy, do you have time to take any more questions?
Sure, I'll take more questions.
Okay.
Just make one comment about
Alana?
the campaign finance reform. So David Rue, our councilman David Rue, has a motion that has been stuck in the Rules Committee, which Herb Wesson, the president of the LA City Council, has been literally keeping there for over a year to ban developer money from being contributed to all LA City elections and to set up a matching fund. This is the kind of thing, you talk about Citizens United, you have to do it on this local level to get some traction.
Right. And we have to work on local action because I feel like I was in Florida a couple of weeks ago. I was actually 30 minutes away from Parkland when it happened. I interviewed a guy who was a self-described Tennessee redneck in a kava bar. I decided to go into a kava bar and see what that was all about. Didn't do a thing for me, by the way. I don't know. But anyway, he was a young guy, and he was a gun owner. And he had, handgun for protection. He had regular guns for shooting targets, and then he had deer for shooting, rifles for shooting deer. And it was really funny because he said that he has not voted in the last 5 years. He didn't vote in the presidential election because it was a choice between Tweedledum and Tweedledee. But if Bernie had been the nominee, he would have voted for Bernie. So this is a self-described Tennessee redneck gun owner. But in Florida, they have a progressive caucus there. In their legislature, which is interesting because their legislature is completely dominated by Republicans. And yet that progressive caucus was all over legislation. They had a website where they had every single bill that was introduced. Do we support this? Are we against it? Where does it stand in committees? What is our action? Who's with us? Who's against us? And I think of our progressive caucus, and I love Karen Burnell and Susie Shannon, Marcy Wood. Every single person on that board is a personal friend of mine, and they're great activists. And yet, for some reason, they're just not on top of any legislation besides SB 562. And we really have to focus, folks, on local and statewide stuff, because that's really where we can make the difference. And, I applaud, Jimmy, because he has a lot of California politicians on his show. And I'm wondering if you feel, as you survey the entire national scene with federal legislation, federal officials and stuff, do you think that there is any hope on the local level if people just stop focusing on this federal stuff and act locally?
Yes, I think that definitely, especially with something like what made me encouraged was, so they got rid of net neutrality, and that hasn't gone totally into effect yet, but I started to become aware of local municipalities who then provide broadband internet to their people, and that's how you get around net neutrality. So it's like, yes, I think you're right. That's a great idea. Start at the local level. I didn't know about that bill that he's holding up. I didn't know about that. Thanks for telling me about it. So, yeah, I think that's the closer you get to the people, the less corrupted normally they are. It is a fact that developer money does have. I think it's in Pasadena, the same thing, developer money.
We have a whole report on it.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? Could you send me?
Yeah, she's with the Coalition to Preserve LA, which was the organization that was behind Measure S, just so you know. And speaking of net neutrality, Ted Lieu, who, I got to come up with a hashtag for him because he used to be good. When I gave him $100 at a fundraiser in 2014, it was because he promised me that he'd be against fracking, he'd be in favor of net neutrality, and he was against the TPP. He has not signed the resolution to the Congress. He's one of only 8 Democrats in the California delegation who has not signed this resolution trying to overturn that net neutrality thing. Why? Because he's too busy tweeting about Trump every goddamn day. Every goddamn day. And he was the one who initially had the thing about Yemen in the Congress a couple of years ago, and he's not saying anything about Bernie's bill because, again, it's all about Trump and Russia.
I got an award from Ted Lieu. I have it framed in my Museum of Irony.
Yeah, Sharon, did you have a question?
We're filling the airways with all the inanities that it's coming out of Trump, you know, in his crazy decision making and his crazy ability to get all the media, you know, but in the meantime, the entire government is being destroyed, you know, department by department, and I cannot believe that that's coming from Trump. And nobody's talking about where that's actually coming from, right? It's like they're hiding behind him, and I don't hear any media coverage or analysis of that.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Carson here, I heard a thing about his $31,000 dining room table that they finally shamed him to cancel the order of. Ben Carson is doing nothing at the Department of HUD. I heard a whole report on NPR about HUD and how they're all demoralized there because he's not doing anything. Zero. And of course, we know, like Scott Pruitt, who's the activist head of the EPA, is in the process of every day repealing yet another clean water bill, clean air bill, you know, whatever.
So this is, well, that's a great point, by the way. So people want to act like this is Trump, and they do it every day. This is neoliberalism. This is not Trump. This is the system. I mean, this is, they want to dismantle government, take away social services, break down any kind of protections, you know, and whether it be worker, environment, or whatever. So that's so, but everyone wants. So, well, it's the same people who have always orchestrated it, right? Wall Street, military-industrial complex, right? Who do you think? And the big oil. I mean, they're all the same people. That's why people say, "Oh, Trump is so horrible." But look who's in his cabinet, right? The people who are the heads of our corporations, right? And the people from Wall Street, Goldman Sachs and Exxon. So when you know the people want to say it's Russia ruining our democracy in our country, to quote that old movie, the call's coming from inside the house, right? We're doing it to ourselves. And when you're saying who's doing it, it's the same. As far as I can tell, it's the same old people. And Trump is just their puppet right now. He doesn't have any ideas. He doesn't have a plan he wants to implement. They're all doing it through him. And so that's why, again, it doesn't every time they make it about Trump's bad personality, they're doing that at the demise of our country, because they should be looking at what's actually happening and the policies are just classic right-wing crazy shit. He's not making up new stuff. That's the stuff that they've been wanting to do all along. By the way, Barack Obama helped them do a lot of it too, right? Barack Obama made the banks bigger. Barack Obama opened up the Arctic to drilling twice. He only stopped it when Shell said they didn't want it anymore. So the biggest export of oil in this country happened under Barack Obama. The biggest oil boom, it happened under Barack. So 8 million people still didn't have health care under Barack Obama's plan. So these are the same people who've been wanting to do this all along. Now they just have an easier guy to work with. And they turned him, you know, on foreign policy. I mean, and to do with the thing that's scary is he actually is ramping up. He actually is doing the bidding of the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex. But they keep reporting it like he's not, which is dangerous.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to end this now because if Jimmy wants to... because it's already 5:15, and I know that this fundraiser was called from 3 to 5, and I know people want to go watch the Oscars. So I want to say once more to the viewing audience, as well as the audience in this room, that this has been a fundraiser for Ankur Patel, who is a corporate-free Bernie-crat running for assembly in California. His race is eminently winnable. You can support his race by going to Ankur, that's spelled A-N-K-U-R, forassembly.com. So signing off from Benedict Canyon here in the hills above Beverly Hills. This has been Lauren Steiner for the Robust Opposition with my special guests Ankur Patel and the incomparable Jimmy Dore.
That was fun.